Some people share everything about their lives, their relationships, their problems, their achievements, even the smallest details of their day. It is almost as if their life only feels real once it has been seen and acknowledged by others. But there's another kind of person who moves through the world very differently. They rarely explain themselves. They do not feel the need to announce their plans. They do not post every milestone, and they are careful about what they reveal about their personal lives. To outsiders, this silence can look mysterious. Sometimes it is even misunderstood as coldness, secrecy, or distance. Yet psychology suggests something far more interesting. People who keep their lives private are not necessarily hiding anything. In many cases, they simply understand something that most people overlook. Every time you share a piece of your life, you are giving someone access to your inner world, your thoughts, your goals, your vulnerabilities, your emotions. And not everyone deserves that access. Private individuals tend to realize this earlier than others. They learn that attention is not always harmless, that opinions can shape your choices, and that once something personal is shared, it can never fully be taken back. So instead of opening every door to their lives, they become selective. They choose carefully who gets to see behind the curtain. This choice often has nothing to do with fear. It has everything to do with awareness. And once you start to understand psychology behind people who live this way, you begin to see something surprising. Their silence is not emptiness. Their silence is intention. But the real question is this: what actually shapes a person into someone who prefers privacy over visibility? To understand that, we need to start with the first psychological trait that quietly separates private individuals from everyone else. One of the first things psychologists notice about people who keep their lives private is how they experience the world internally rather than externally. Most people process life by expressing it. They talk about their thoughts as soon as they appear. They share their plans while they are still forming. They release emotions by speaking them out loud. For them, communication is the way they make sense of what is happening inside their mind. But private individuals often work differently. Their first instinct is not to speak. Their first instinct is to observe. When something meaningful happens in their life, they sit with it. They reflect on it quietly. They analyze their own feelings before letting anyone else see them. Instead of broadcasting their experiences, they process them internally until they fully understand what those experiences mean. This creates a powerful difference in how they move through the world. Because while others are constantly expressing, private people are constantly interpreting. They notice patterns in behavior. They recognize emotional shifts in conversations. They begin to understand the deeper motivations behind what people say and do. And over time, something interesting happens. The more a person lives internally, the less they feel the need to expose their inner world to everyone around them, not because they are secretive, but because their thoughts feel more valuable when they remain personal. In a strange way, privacy becomes a form of mental clarity. It allows them to think without interruption, to reflect without outside influence, and to grow without feeling the pressure to explain every step of their journey. And once someone becomes comfortable living this way, another psychological trait often begins to appear. They become extremely careful about who they allow into their inner world. After a while, people who live internally begin to notice something that others rarely stop to think about. Every time you reveal something personal, you are also exposing a piece of your emotional energy. Your plans, your struggles, your goals, even your happiness can quickly become topics for other people's opinions. Some will support you, some will doubt you, and others may judge you in ways you never expected. Private individuals become aware of this dynamic very early. They begin to realize that not every conversation deserves access to their inner world. Not every question needs a full answer. Not every curiosity from others comes from genuine care. So instead of explaining themselves constantly, they develop a quiet filter. Before sharing something personal, They instinctively ask themselves a simple question. Is this person someone who truly needs to know this about my life? If the answer is no, they simply keep it to themselves. This is not about distrust. It is about energy management. Private individuals understand that emotional energy is limited, and once it is spent on unnecessary explanations, it cannot easily be recovered. That is why many of them prefer to move quietly toward their goals. They focus on progress instead of announcements. They allow results to speak for them rather than conversations. And over time, this habit creates something that many people overlook. When you stop explaining every part of your life, you begin to see more clearly how others behave when they do not have access to your personal story. This is where another psychological trait begins to develop. Private people slowly become extremely skilled observers of human behavior. When someone stops sharing everything about their life, something unexpected begins to happen. Their attention shifts. Instead of focusing on expressing themselves, they start noticing what everyone else is doing. Private individuals often become natural observers of human behavior. Because they speak less about their own lives, their mind has more space to study the people around them. They notice the tone behind someone's words. They see how people react when they hear good news or bad news. They pay attention to who listens sincerely and who only waits for their turn to speak. Over time, these small observations begin to form patterns. They start recognizing when someone is being genuine and when someone is pretending. They can sense when a person asks questions out of curiosity and when those questions come from comparison or hidden judgment. This ability grows quietly without them even realizing it. While others are busy explaining their lives, private people are learning how people behave when they think no one is paying attention. And this changes how they interact with the world. They become more selective with their words. They choose their conversations carefully. They understand that not every environment is meant for honesty, and not every person is meant to hear their personal story. The more they observe, the clearer one thing becomes. Access to their inner world is something that should be given carefully, not freely. And this is where another powerful habit begins to appear in their personality. Instead of constantly defending their privacy, they develop a much quieter strategy. They create boundaries that most people never even notice. One of the most interesting things about private people is that they rarely announce their boundaries. They do not usually say that a subject is too personal. They do not make long explanations about why they prefer not to share certain details. Instead, they develop something much more subtle. They create silent boundaries. If someone asks a question that feels too intrusive, they may answer briefly and change the subject. If a conversation begins to move toward an area of their life they prefer to keep personal, they gently redirect the discussion. Most people barely notice it happening. To outsiders, it can seem like these individuals simply do not have much to say about themselves. But the reality is very different. Private people are often very aware of where their personal limits exist. They just do not feel the need to defend those limits with long explanations. They understand that the more you justify your boundaries, the more some people will try to push past them. So instead of arguing or explaining, they quietly close certain doors. Some parts of their lives are open for conversation. Other parts remain entirely their own. This mindset creates a sense of control over their personal space. It allows them to interact with others without feeling exposed or overwhelmed by constant curiosity. And as this habit becomes stronger, another psychological pattern often begins to reveal itself. Many private individuals did not develop this way by accident. Their preference for privacy was shaped by experiences that taught them something important about trust. For many private individuals, their relationship with privacy did not appear suddenly. It developed slowly through experience. At some point in their life, they learned an important lesson about what happens when personal things are shared too freely. Maybe they opened up to someone who later used that information against them. Maybe they shared a goal and were met with doubt instead of support. Sometimes it happens during childhood, when a person learns that their emotions are dismissed, misunderstood, or exposed in ways that make them feel vulnerable. Experiences like these leave a quiet mark on the way someone navigates relationships. Over time, the mind begins to adapt. Instead of sharing first and evaluating later, private people reverse the process. They observe first. They learn about the person in front of them. They watch how that person treats others, how they react to honesty, how they handle sensitive information. Only after trust proves itself do they begin to reveal more about their own lives. This does not mean they expect the worst from people. It means they have learned that trust is something that grows over time, not something that should be given immediately. Because once someone truly understands how fragile personal information can be, they become far more intentional about who they allow into their inner world. And interestingly, this careful approach often leads to another powerful trait that quietly defines many private individuals. They begin to develop a deep sense of confidence that does not depend on anyone else's attention. As people become more comfortable keeping parts of their lives private, something deeper begins to grow inside them, a form of confidence that does not rely on constant feedback from others. Many people feel the need to share their progress in order to feel that it matters. A new goal, a personal milestone, a change in their life often feels incomplete until someone else sees it and acknowledges it. Private individuals often experience life differently. Their sense of direction comes from within. When they set a goal, they focus on working toward it rather than announcing it. When something meaningful happens in their life, they allow themselves to experience it fully without feeling the need to present it to an audience. Because of this, their motivation tends to remain more stable. Their decisions are less influenced by opinions, praise, or criticism. They move forward based on what feels meaningful to them, not on what receives the most attention. This kind of internal stability creates a quiet strength. It allows them to grow, change, and evolve without feeling pressure to explain every step along the way. And over time, this mindset leads to something that many people rarely experience in a world built around constant visibility, a sense of personal freedom. When you stop living for observation, you begin living with far more clarity. But the real advantage of privacy goes even deeper than freedom alone. There is another benefit that quietly shapes the lives of people who choose to keep most of their world to themselves. When you look closely, people who keep their lives private are not withdrawing from the world. They are simply choosing a different way to move through it. In a time where constant sharing has become normal, privacy often appears unusual. Social platforms encourage people to document everything, to explain every decision, to make their lives visible to anyone willing to watch. Over time, many people begin to feel that visibility is the same as connection. But private individuals understand something different. Not every moment needs an audience. Not every thought needs to be spoken. And not every part of life becomes more meaningful just because it is seen by others. For them, privacy becomes a form of protection. It protects their peace from unnecessary opinions. It protects their goals from outside pressure. It protects their relationships from becoming public conversations. This creates space for something that is becoming increasingly rare, a life that develops quietly, without constant observation. People often think more clearly. They make decisions based on their own values rather than the expectations around them. They build relationships that are chosen carefully instead of shared publicly. And because of this, their world often becomes smaller, but much deeper. Fewer people know everything about them, but the ones who do usually understand them on a far more genuine level. In the end, the psychology of private people is not about secrecy or distance. It is about intention. They understand that the most valuable parts of life are not always meant to be displayed. Some things grow better when they are protected. Sometimes the most meaningful experiences, the most important goals, and the most authentic versions of ourselves develop quietly away from attention. And perhaps that is why the people who say the least about their lives often end up understanding themselves the most.